Pornos. Oh, pornos. That was so random.
I can see how you thought I'd say that.
Alright. Hello, hello. I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Not sponsored. It's Fallon. Oh, yay! Sickness is mostly gone. So our duo is back at doing.
The duo.
That was clever. Come on. Give me credit.
That was very, very clever. I'm just going to sit here like this and just...
Okay, so here we are again, continuing on with our 50 States series, our second episode. This is going to be The Ghosts of Alabama. Ghost. Okay, so before we get started, as some of you may know, the last episode that I did, I tried something new where I asked like a life question or a philosophical question, and I did get some listener feedback on that. And it seems that the fun fact is more preferred, so I'm just going to stick with that. So, here is your fun fact for this episode. Actually, a couple of different fun facts, but fun nonetheless.
Fun facts. Fun facts.
Ribbon eels are born male and die female. But before dying, they lay eggs, which is actually one of the other ways you know they're about to die. They typically die within a month of laying their eggs.
Oh, that's sad.
Another fun fact about the ribbon eels are that they change colors throughout the different stages of their life. They are typically born black. In the middle of their lifespan, they turn blue. And towards the end of it, they turn yellow.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, interesting little critters there, the ribbon eels.
I wonder how long they live.
I don't know. I didn't look that up. I felt like 3 or 4 fun facts on one thing was pretty sufficient.
Yeah, I was just talking ahead. Like, I wonder how long they live because, like the 3,
yeah.
And then they're born male and they die female. So.
They are really pretty, though. So if you haven't seen one, I definitely suggest Googling a picture of them because they are really pretty.
I can't.
It's true. Technically, you could.
Well, I guess if I used your phone, I could, but...
Yeah. In today's episode, I'm going to be bringing you 3 different stories out of different parts of Alabama for the Ghosts of Alabama episode. But I can promise after diving into these stories out of Alabama, these won't be my last ghost stories from Alabama. This state was incredibly interesting to research, to say the least. I didn't have any idea how interesting it was going to be, but for lack of better words, fun. So here we go. Ghosties. Story number 1. The Haunting in Tuscaloosa. The story of the Drish Mansion.
Drish Mansion.
Say that 5 times fast.
No. I thought about it. I was like, no.
That R will turn into a W real quick, I promise. So, Dr. John Drish was born in 1795 in Loudoun County, Virginia. And he would move to Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 1822 after the death of his first wife, Catherine, with whom he had 1 child, also named Catherine. And that's where he would build the now infamous Drish House. There are many different versions and stories about what makes the Drish House so infamous, and they are all surrounded by the tales of it being haunted.
Haunted.
Drish would go on to marry his second wife, Sarah Owen McKinney. In some sources said 1825, others said 1835, but I feel like 1825 makes the most sense, so I'm going to stick with that one.
Okay.
Sarah was also a widow, and although Dr. Drish was well off financially in his own right with his farming and being a physician, Sarah was really well off. So together they had a lot of money.
Nice.
Dr. Drish was also a credited building contractor, and with their combined wealth, Dr. Drish was also able to have the best of the best when it came to everything. but especially when it came to the caliber of, and I'm sorry to say this word, it's just part of the story, when it came to the caliber of slaves they owned. I'm sorry that I put that in there. It's a part of history that I absolutely hate, but it was a reality of the time, and especially in that area, and it does play a role in the history of the house as well as the family, so I kind of had to include it.
Right.
Among them were many who were considered artisans. They were extremely skilled and were able to transform the house into a work of art more than once. In fact, the most of the construction that was done in Tuscaloosa at the time were done by the artisans. Dr. Drish also utilized his wealth to invest in things like railroads and cotton mills, and he was even elected to state legislature, which I don't think he stayed with for a very long time, but it's still a pretty impressive accolade to have on your resume. So
yeah, for sure.
But as good as the Drish's lives might have appeared to some, it certainly wasn't without its problems. It was said that Dr. Drish had developed quite the drinking problem as well as a gambling problem.
That ain't good.
Then there was also the stories of his eldest daughter, Catherine. Dr. Drish wasn't too fond of the man that she originally fell in love with, and he forbid them from being together. Dr. Drish would end up arranging a marriage for his daughter to a man named William W. King. He forced her to marry King against her will by ensuring the man she loved was driven out of town, and in at least one version, he had gone so far as locking her in a room for weeks and depriving her of food outside of bread and water until he was able to get her to agree to marry his suitor, the aforementioned King.
Oh, that's crappy.
Yeah, I really didn't like this first guy for some reason. I couldn't really find why, other than maybe he wasn't rich, or he didn't have a good standing in the community. I'm not really sure what it was about this guy, but he did not like him, and he did not want his only daughter marrying him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's probably wasn't as well off as his choice.
That would be my guess, but I'm not going to say that that's fact because I could not find any information about this guy. The newlyweds were said to have traveled to New Orleans for their honeymoon, and so the story goes that Catherine would spot her ex-lover in the crowd from a balcony, and from that point on, she started to slowly mentally decline more and more. Despite her mental state, the couple would go on to have 3 children, 2 boys, John R.D. King and Edmund W.D. King, and a daughter named Cora. But sadly, Cora would pass away at only 4 years old, further contributing to Catherine's mental decline.
Oh, poor baby.
After Cora's passing, Mr. King dropped Catherine and the boys back off on Dr. Drish's doorstep, where he then fled back to New Orleans, where he moved, filed for divorce, and claimed Catherine to be insane.
Dang.
She reached such a frail mental state that she couldn't even maintain a stable conversation. It's said that her slip out of reality triggered Dr. Drish's relocking her in a room on the top floor of the mansion where the windows were bolted shut and someone was watching her 24/7.
That's good for the mental health.
And some sources say that's where she stayed until she died. I did read one source that said that she was actually sent off to live with relatives somewhere, but that kind of doesn't really make sense for the future stories, so I'm not going to lean that way. I'm going to lean more on she actually stayed there until she passed. I read another story about... That was loud. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to yell at y'all.
I can hear, I promise.
I'm so sorry. I read another story about Dr. Drish's niece, who was also staying in the Drish house. Her name was Helen Whiting. She was married to a man named Fitch. It said that he was a drunk and an incredibly jealous guy. And when Helen asked her husband whether or not he would ever hurt her, he replied by cutting her neck with a shaving razor to the point of almost severing her head.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Fitch would go on to stand trial for the crime and be found insane, in which afterwards he would be sent to an asylum.
So she just asked him a question.
Yeah, well, they had been having, I guess they'd been having some issues a little bit before that because of his drinking and his jealousy. And so she was kind of trying to make an effort to soothe the waters, I guess. And it wasn't going well. And so I guess that question just triggered something in him. I don't know. But I did also read that he actually only spent a few years in the asylum before being released, and then he went on to work for the railroad and live his life.
So nothing ever happened after that. Just that one little snap.
Just that one little snap, and some time in the asylum, and then
maybe he really had some issues.
I only read that in one source, so I don't know. It's hard with the ghost stories because there's so many different accounts and versions of the ghost stories. But I tried to include as many different versions and spins of it as I could because I wasn't sure which ones were the factual ones. Right. And maybe they all have a small layer of truth and fact to them. I don't know, but...
It's good to include it all in there just so you can kind of make your own judgment. I
tried to. So much of Helen's property was never removed from the mansion, and the servants of the house swore her things being touched or moved would cause Helen's ghost to resurrect and take them. Between this tragedy...
Take the possessions or take the people?
No, take the people. They were worried if they touched her stuff, she would come after them for touching her things. Between this tragedy, the ill state of his daughter, his gambling and drinking problems, the Civil War, and the abolishment of slavery in 1865, where I read he lost, I think he had at that time 70 to 90 servants, and a lot of whom he depended on for his farming and his household needs. The fortune of the Drish that they had previously enjoyed, it pretty much went away completely. He lost pretty much everything between all of those events. Yeah. I read a couple different versions of what happened to Dr. Drish. In one version, he jumped out of bed in a state of delirium and fell down the stairs. Ooh. In another version, he threw himself from the second floor balcony. And in another, he had come home drunk from another bad gambling expedition with nothing to show for his travels, and upon being escorted to bed, he jerked his arm away from those who were trying to help him, and he fell backwards down the stairs. Mm-hmm. He died on July 25th, 1867, at the age of 71 or 72. I read in another source that said that it was 75, but doing the math on the years from his birth to then, 75 doesn't add up. Okay. But I included it because it wasn't a source. It seems the most popular belief is that his fall down the stairs was a result of his drinking. Sarah held a wake for him in the tower on the top floor where his body had candles lit and surrounding him. I read in one source she did this because Dr. Drish had actually left a letter specifically requesting it. Huh. So, I actually read a couple of different sources where he had written a letter specifically requesting what he wanted done when he died. So I don't know if he wrote those letters a couple of years prior just because he knew he was getting up there in age, or if he wrote them soon before he actually died because he was maybe predicting something was going to happen. I'm not really sure, but I did read a couple of different sources that said that he actually did leave letters where he requested what he wanted done. And Sarah did follow the letters for what he wanted.
That's interesting when you want candles all around you.
Well, either way, Sarah would now be left a widow for a second time. And it would also come to light shortly after his passing that they had no money left. Oh, no. She was now alone and had zero money. She was fortunate enough to have loyal servants who actually stayed in the mansion with her until she passed away on April 27th, 1884.
Well, that was awfully nice.
It was nice. I thought the same thing. I thought,
she had to have been a really good person.
That was kind of my same. I read that she was very intelligent and very nice and giving and generous when they had the means for her to be generous and giving. So I read a lot of positive things about her during her life. But I also read that she had become obsessed with the idea of being buried exactly how John had been and having her funeral be exactly how John's was. She had even become so obsessed with it that when he had those candles lit around him or whatever, she saved those candles from his wake so that those exact same candles could be burned around her just like they were him.
Oh.
But sadly, when she did pass, before you get too on, the candles couldn't be found. They were gone.
Huh.
So her wishes were not able to be carried out. Before her passing, the stories of the hauntings of the house had already begun, with servants claiming to hear footsteps and hearing Dr. Drish yell just as he had the night he fell. The claims of a haunting definitely escalated once Miss Drish did die. It's believed that she was so upset and distraught in her passing that her burial wishes weren't fulfilled, that she now lives in the tower that her husband's wake was held in and lights phantom fires.
Oh, wow.
There have been many claims of people seeing a fire coming from there, with no one actually being up there or any flames actually being there either.
Hmm.
It's also believed that Catherine, Drish's daughter's ghost, haunts the house as well. There have been reports of cold spots, sightings of a woman in white wandering the halls, and flickering lights.
Always a woman in white.
You know, I was thinking that earlier. They're always in white. There's got to be something to that. That may be something worth looking into.
Yeah.
So this story has been featured in a couple of different books, but perhaps the most popular book was written in 1969 by Margaret Gillis Figg and Catherine Tucker Wyndham, and it's called The 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey. The chapter that she wrote specifically for this story, I think, is called The Lights in the Tower, or something like that. Ghost adventurers have gone there, psychics have gone there, and many more people have gone there from all over the world just to try to experience meeting any of the residents that is said to still be there from its past. And there's actually quite a few accounts from people who have claimed to have proof that they've experienced things in the house.
You said that Zach and Aaron were there?
Who's that, the Ghost Adventure people?
Ghost Adventures.
I actually do think I read that they did go to this house. I could be wrong, but I'm like 95% sure that I did read that they did go to this house.
That's cool. I love Ghost Adventures.
She does. She loves it. After the passing of Sarah Drish, the house changed hands many, many, many times and has served as many different things throughout the years. It was even almost torn down once, but luckily this historic landmark has survived the years and today is actually an event center and is one of the most significant pieces of history in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, awesome.
And again, this is just one of the many, many ghost stories coming out of Alabama. I chose this one because of the unique history of the house and the story that was attached to it. But there's a lot of really interesting stories, and I definitely hope to get the chance to tell some of those, as I've already said before, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to say it again by the end of this episode. I didn't know that Alabama was so, I don't want to say riddled, but rich with paranormal activities and phenomenons and folklore, and I didn't know that at all.
You just have to keep doing it until they're done.
Oh gosh,
we're going to be on this for a long time.
Yeah, we're going to be on Alabama forever. No, we are going to keep rolling with the 50 State series, but I am absolutely going to come back to Alabama because Alabama, you are an interesting state. So, story number 2 is the disappearance of Orion Williamson. This is a really bizarre story. It's not really a ghost story, but I thought it was pretty interesting, so I will leave it up to you to conclude what you think actually happened in this one.
All right.
So the story goes that in the summer of 1864, Orion Williamson and his wife and son, who lived on a farm in Selma, Alabama, were relaxing on their porch. The farm manager, Andrew, was across the field attending the horses on the other side, and Orion had remembered something that he needed to tell him. According to the people who were present, so that would be his wife, his son, the manager, Andrew, his neighbor, Armour Wren, and his neighbor's son, James, who were passing by in their buggy, the buggy driver, and some of the workers that were out in the field. When Wren's buggy went by, they waved hello to Williamson, who waved back and took one step forward and literally just disappeared.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody, just disappeared.
Wow.
Shocked at what they all had just witnessed, they all went fleeing over to the spot where he was standing, thinking maybe he had fallen into a hole or something. But there was nothing there. No hole.
What?
Nothing there. This caused Orion's wife to pass out and to be taken to the hospital. And once she was at the hospital, the story of what had just happened spread like crazy. This prompted hundreds of people to form a search party and head for the farm. The searchers, which also had a mix of geologists who volunteered to help in the search to see if there was maybe some kind of a geological explanation, they searched for weeks. Every inch of that farm was scoured over time and time again, and no trace of him was ever found.
Wow, just nothing.
Nothing. Well, even more bizarre, his wife and son would swear that for weeks they could hear Orion calling for them. For weeks after he disappeared. And every time they heard it, it was coming from the same spot he disappeared in, and they would run to look for him, but nothing was there every time.
Wow, like my body's doing that like weird little...
Like when you can feel something's true or really did happen, you get that tingling feeling.
It's like,
yeah, I got that too when I was reading this. They said that they would hear that sound the sound of his voice every day for weeks until it would eventually grow weaker and weaker, and it would eventually just fade away.
Oh, no.
And then they couldn't hear him anymore. Another strange thing that happened was in the next spring after Orion disappeared, a ring of dead grass showed up in the exact same spot where he had vanished.
Huh.
So I would like to note that around the same time, there had been several reports of UFO-like types of happenings in the area. I'm just saying. And this time frame wouldn't be the only time frame in Alabama in which UFO-type activity would be reported. Just ask the town of Fife. On February 11th, 1989, there would be 50 different reports of UFO activity between the hours of 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. that evening.
That sounds familiar, Fife.
It does. I thought the same thing. I'm definitely going to look more into that as well. It's on my list.
It's on the list.
Alabama has caused me to create like a whole list. I'm telling you, it's interesting. Another strange attachment to the Orion Williamson case is that a very well-known writer at the time, like super well-known established writer whose name was Ambrose Bierce, he actually covered the Williamson story, and ironically, Bierce too would just vanish abruptly in Mexico in 1914. But because of his detailed and extensive coverage of the Orion case, Bierce was actually given credit for keeping the Orion story kind of in the know. So it's kind of credited to being the only reason why it's been kept alive this whole time, because of his stories about it.
See, I wonder if like maybe whenever he disappeared, like he slipped through a...
Some people say a portal.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Like a wormhole or like...
Yeah, like there's like a little tear in dimensions and he just slipped through and then he was trying to like get out and That
was my first thought too. But man, could you imagine how horrible that would be? Like not only just to slip into a different reality or dimension, but to also be able to still see what's happening in your world and just have no access or ability to reach out at all.
I wonder like if he just... I wonder, because he said that like it just went, his voice went weaker and weaker. I wonder if he just got to the point to where he realized that if that's what happened, that there's nothing he could do.
They can't hear him.
Yeah, so maybe he just went on and started life in a new dimension.
We're gonna hope that that's what happened.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed that that's what happened. But either way, I thought that was a really crazy story, so I wanted to throw that one in there.
And the other guy just disappearing too.
There were some different theories about his disappearance as well. Some people thought that maybe he had joined some kind of a Mexican army and gone into some kind of a war battle and gotten killed, or maybe just did a story he shouldn't have done, and that caused something to happen to him. But either way, he just did. Nobody ever found him. He was never heard of again. So he just was registered as vanished as well, disappeared.
That's crazy. He was like a really famous writer.
He was a super famous writer for that time.
Huh.
Yeah, again, another one to further look into. I would have looked into it more for this case, but that's not really what this case is supposed to be about. Right. But I definitely am not against dedicating a case to his story as well, because I did read about him while I was doing this, and super interesting guy.
Huh. You should totally do something like that.
Yeah, he lived a really prosperous life as far as his studies and his knowledge and the stories that he covered and did. Okay, so this is story number 3. This is my last story in this episode, and this is The Haunting of Bear Creek Swamp.
Bear Creek Swamp.
This is one of the most popular sites for hauntings in Alabama. It's located in, I hope I say this right, if not, please feel free to correct me, but it's located in Autauga County on both sides of Highway 14, and it's also one of the sites with the most recorded first-hand experiences happening there.
Ooh.
This swamp is kind of the equivalent of like Bloody Mary or Candyman. The story goes that there's a woman that roams the swamp looking for her baby. So if you go out there when it's dark and repeat the words, "I don't have your baby," 3 times, the woman will appear and attack you. Her spirit isn't the only one claimed to haunt the swamp. People have reported many different things coming from it, such as loud booms, different apparatus, and orbs. There's stories that if you go down County Road 3, which apparently also runs through the swamp, if you turn off your car and wait, lights will start flickering from the swamp, followed by orbs coming at you. But be careful if you do decide to tempt this tale, because there's been countless reports from people who have claimed they either couldn't start their cars again or their batteries died, and others claiming to have difficulties getting their car to start, but they would eventually get it to start and they were able to go. It's scary for the people whose batteries died or they couldn't get their cars to start at all. Terrifying.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Yeah, I would be mortified. There's also the legend of the Alabama tribe warriors, and I'll go into them more on a future case after the 50-state series is completed. But their spirits are said to be walking the swamps as well. One of the unusual things about the tales of this swamp is that it's been reported that you can experience bizarre encounters and happenings, whether it's day or night there. But no matter when you go, according to locals and legend, do not go alone.
Seems like very, very good advice.
I agree. And just a real quick ad is that in late 2014, the local sheriff's office recovered 21 dolls from the swamp that had been planted in the swamp with bamboo stakes lining County Road 3. Practical joke? Maybe.
Oh, that's not
I know that's your worst nightmare. Fallon is terrified of dolls.
Not dolls.
Dolls.
Porcelain. Old. Do you have one?
I got that little chick back there. I wouldn't move her. She looks cozy.
Yeah, she does. Just old.
Dolls.
Porcelain.
She's scared of dolls, y'all.
Oh, porcelain. I'm not scared. I just don't like
dolls,
them.
Y'all.
They're creepy. I don't like them. Creepy.
Okay, so I know I did 3 kind of quick stories here, but these are just a few of the countless tales and legends coming out of Alabama. There are so many great ones that I've already said I 100% plan on covering in the future. Tales such as the ghost of the angry architect, the unquiet ghost at Gaineswood.
The unquiet ghost?
The unquiet ghost at Gaineswood. Okay. Mobile's pipe-smoking captain. Cool. The return of the ruined baker. The crying spirit of the well.
Oh, I don't like that one.
The children of Maple Hill Cemetery.
Don't like that one either.
And then there's the town with the hole that will not stay. It I don't know how to word that, but the hole They can't dig one. It fills itself back up. There's a story behind that.
So they dig a hole.
They dig a hole and it fills itself back up.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So many more. There's also a ton of folklore, and there's quite a bit of phenomenons that are all coming at you from Alabama. This state is rich in history and stories, and if you haven't looked into it, it's fascinating. And I look forward to getting back into some of these stories. If you have a specific story you want me to tell, or if you've had an experience of a ghostly or phenomenon type nature, we would love to hear it. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But for now, that's my ghost stories of Alabama.
Yeah, if you have something you'd like us to say or to tell or to research.
Yeah, that too. But I'm curious if any of our listeners have either been through Alabama or are from Alabama and you've gone anywhere near the Bear Creek Swamp, or if you've actually gone to the Drish house. If any of y'all have had any kind of experiences there.
I've been through Alabama. I've been through Mobile. I'm kind of curious about the pipe smoking captain. He sounds pretty cool.
He does sound cool. That's the thing with these ghosts. Like, a lot of the stories that I was looking at or whatever, I don't know how to say it without it sounding weird, but these ghosts sound kind of awesome.
Yeah, they do.
They're not obviously not.
Some of them are kind of like
the lady who attacks you, but
yeah.
Some of these ghost stories sound pretty fun to get into and learn about. Anyway. That's our Ghosts of Alabamas. So, I don't know why I put an S on Alabama, but...
Alabamas. Kind of like me in the Arkansas.
I hope you enjoyed it. And don't worry, Alabama, we still got one more true crime case coming at you. It's going to be done by this one over here. And that should be our episode after this one. And then after that, we'll roll right into our next state, which is Alaska.
Arkansas.
So, Alaska.
Arkansas.
So you still have plenty of time to shoot a request or a suggestion our way for that.
Yeah, Arkansas.
Other than that, thank you guys so much for spending time with us today. We've had a lot of fun. Let's see if we can do this in unison. We've messed this up the last few times, so let's see how it goes. We are Render the Darkness. Yay! Bye! We can do it on the ghost ones.
Did we do the Render the Darkness at the beginning?